Welcome back. This is Chicken Philosophy, a special episode during the break. Song of Verulamium is what we're gonna go over today, but don't worry, I'm gonna get somewhere quiet first. Now, for those of you who are watching this right now and thinking, hey, wait a minute, this looks familiar. That's because we've been here before. 1 year and about 5 months ago, toward the early days of Chicken Philosophy, when we were doing the Arbatel series. Now, some of you might note that I just pointed to the corner of the screen and nothing popped up. That's because I don't have my computer here in New Delhi. And later, I don't know when, but later, I'm gonna put a link to the Arbatel series. But yeah, so if you're not seeing that pop up, that means I'm not back and going yet. That's loud. And anyway, so it's currently March 4th of 2025, and the last episode that we did, which I think was Nag Hammadi, right, was on the 25th of February. So it's been a week and a day, I think, right? Is that about right? A week and 2 days, something like that. And it's going to be at least another week, at least. So, for a number of reasons, not the least of which is my own personal addiction to making YouTube videos, and in particular these days, Chicken Philosophy, I decided to make this special episode. But also, Song of Verulamium is one of my favorite poems by my dad, and I had a recital of it up that I did years ago, like 15 years ago. And in the great purge I've mentioned before, every so often, I don't think I'm going to do it anymore, but from 2006 up until 2017, there were a couple times that I just deleted everything, deleted my internet presence to a certain extent. Once in 2007 and once in 2017. I think that was it. Anyway, enough about that. So, I was going to say, we can make this a little bit interactive and fun. If you have another screen available, or if you want to pause this and go to Google Maps and look up Ashtavakra Park. Can you see that? Spelled like that. Aastha space Kunj space Park, as in the Korean surname. Fans of Parasite. Anyway, that's where I am right now. I just entered. So if you look at the map, you'll see the park, and you'll see like kind of a big bite taken out of it on the upper left side. And it says Sant Nagar, east of Kailash. That's where, if you're familiar with my earlier work before Chicken Philosophy, then you'll remember that Buddhist Books was in New Delhi with the honking and the dog barking outside, many dogs barking outside as opposed to just the one in Majorda. Anyway, before it was pink, so that was in Sant Nagar. So that's Pio and I lived there from 2018 until 2020, and then Buddhist Books started in Anjuna when we were staying in Goa. Then we moved back to New Delhi for a year and a half, and most of that year and a half of Buddhist Books was there. Anyway, enough about that. So I'm now in that park. I just entered from a gate that was connected to Sant Nagar. The lighting is better if I walk backwards. I'm not going to walk backwards, but we're going to do a little tour of the park. I don't know if I'm going to make it all the way to Lotus Temple. You can see there on the map is Lotus Temple. That's a Baha'i temple. And there is a video I made called Darjeeling, no, Dharamshala Rishikesh. And if, as before, if I am back in Goa, then that link will pop up right there. That's my most popular video, 14,000 some odd views on that one. So right now I'm headed north a little bit, northerly, northeasterly toward ISKCON Temple, which is like on the map, it's like right outside toward the right, the top part, ISKCON, International something something Krishna cult, the famous Hare Krishnas that used to be a lot more present in airports in decades of yore than they are now. So this is one of those. There's like many of those places. This is one of them. There's more than one in New Delhi. This is one of the ones in New Delhi. So that's behind me. Anyway, I suppose that's about it for an intro. I can go ahead and get into the poem, and then I'll talk a little bit about the poem afterward. I'm not going to walk to Lotus Temple. I was going to walk to Lotus Temple, but it's enough to point you in the direction of the Dharamshala Rishikesh video. It's good. There's a reason why it has 14,000 views. I'll just get to today's recital. So, this is something that, right, I had recited long ago when I had long hair, and if you go on Google, actually after this video comes out, I'm very happy to, no one's going to search for Song of Verulamium if they're not already familiar with it. But right now, Google comes up with nothing. Big goose egg. Verulamium. But if you search for Song of the Verulamium, no. Song of Verulamium on Facebook, then you get an old Facebook note, a thing that used to exist. And there's an image, which is going to be the thumbnail image. Can you see that at all? Of my dad on Halloween of, I don't know, 1983 or something. With the blue face. All right, I'm just going to read it, and then we'll talk about it. So here it is. Song of Verulamium by John Dan Reib. My ancestors came down from oak-treed hills to stand in high noon chariot paths and look upon lost Verulamium. What a great clay place it was, with windows knocked out, the ragged, thin-limbed children of the one-time conquerors, wandering with their stomachs stretched by starvation in the dust-steamed streets, tripping in the chariot ruts, dodging the great rats that dashed this way and that, from the gutter shade green and the water pipes, broken open by the many wintered snow and the ground rotting rain. In the once great city forum square, on the places where the custom gave to each, sat elders between the trellis columns, staring at the center of space, and the flies crawled across their faces as they blinked now and again and again. And behold, gaunt, stingy women stared down on them from the rooftop balconies of once great city houses, or wandered this way and that on the byways of the streets, in their dust-drawn nightgowns, begging my fathers for food, in a tongue they did not know, and gesturing with their hands to their mouths as they did so. What my fathers could have fed them, they would not have known to eat, of the green plant that grows where the branches of the oak trees grow, of the acorn that falls beneath the great oak shade, of the egg of the bird that flies in the ever evening glow, of the moss that grows beyond the cutting blade. What they, the hungry, hungered for was to feast of departed feasts, to make slaughter of dead cattle, even as if they lived forevermore, to walk on the pavilions and watch their slaves pick grapes, or blindly whip them as they turned the gristling stakes. They who lived as conquerors could never know to dream of eating grass, could never walk in morning forests, or tread as friends in little people's paths. Theirs were the glories of the signposts at their doorways, though vampires nested in the triumph arches' eaves. Theirs were the memories of bygone triumphs' stories, as night moths feasted on their nightshirts' silken sleeves. Theirs were the times of remembered human crimes, of laughing at the burning human trees. Theirs were the eyes of victory's pride-wrought fires, and voyage across the known and unknown seas. In the deep heat of high noon summer sun, my forefathers watched the wind blow across the square in the center of the hulk called Verulamium. Then they left, but soon the Saxons came, and lo, it was a place without a name. Well, I think he wrote that in the early 60s, but I can't be sure. I have a lot of typed poetry by my dad that I assume was written in the late 50s or early 60s. I think this may have been written shortly after he went on a trip with his mother on the Queen Mary, around the world, as they say. They went to Bombay and many other places. And it's interesting. So, if you don't already know, Verulamium was one of the two, urban centers of Roman colonized Britannia. So the other one was London. London, of course, ended up with a city built on a city, built on a city, kind of like Rome is, onion layers of cities built on cities, built on cities. Verulamium, I haven't been there personally, but I understand there's ruins these days, like old ruins. When the Western Roman Empire, in other words, the Roman Empire, not the Byzantine Empire, but the Western Roman Empire was falling apart, one of the first things that they did was call everybody back from, call their garrisons and whatnot back from their holdings in the British Isles, leaving behind the people he was describing in the poem, and leaving it at the mercy of basically the Celts. The poem is written from the perspective of my forefathers. They're written by my dad, so I guess that's my forefathers too, or at least how he imagined them. And I find it very interesting, and beyond interesting, it informed kind of my earliest worldview that has, I have a fondness for and maybe a default back to, but personally I've kind of a more nuanced perspective these days, as did he develop a more nuanced perspective. Back in the days when he would have written this, he referred to himself among close friends as a neo-druid, not because he was a member of any kind of druid-based cult, but just kind of astrally, probably, as he would say. In other words, identifying with a mystified half-remembrance, non-remembrance of a distant ancestral past down a particular line. He, as I, had many ancestors in England as well as Scotland and Ireland and Wales. And so, you know, and this is something that goes beyond just my dad and I. And, you know, you can even find people identifying with the old Roman occupation of Britannia in the context of Brexit, among other things. As far as in the midst of, you know, the recently fallen British Empire and being a product of an earlier, you know, America was a British, the 13 colonies and all were British colonies before they declared independence and became the United States of America. And so there's a definite, you know, relationship with the British Empire, which, as I've mentioned elsewhere on this channel, is very reminiscent of the old Roman Empire. In fact, I've referred to it as Rome 2.0, specifically in the context of the Roman Empire. So I believe that there was a feeling of disgust, which is encouraged by an identification with an American identity. A feeling of disgust toward the British Empire, understandably so, right? Which perhaps informed and led my dad to seek out a way of identifying with his own genes in a way that puts his sense of his ancestors, my forefathers, my fathers, on the same level as other indigenous peoples who, in addition to, you know, as everybody loves an underdog, or, you know, as people identify with oppressed peoples, also, in addition, the sort of mystification, the dissatisfaction with, you know, sort of the Martin Luther type sterile forms of organized spirituality, and a longing for a more magical, nature-y, earth-based spirituality. The poem seems to indicate an identification with an ancient, so ancient that nobody even knows, but my dad knows, because he often operated on intuition and personal astral reflection and meditation. Even when this was written, of course, decades before I knew him. But when I knew him, I remember one time in particular, he was crying. I only ever saw him cry twice in my whole life. And once was during meditation. He was in there meditating on his own with his eyes closed, and then he started like crying, weeping, and I went in and asked him what was wrong, and he started describing something he had experienced where our great grandmother was a Native American who had been raped by a European settler, and he was apparently experiencing that from her perspective. And so that actually, as opposed to being, you know, only a footnote about how he would use personal meditative reflection to peer into his own genes, sort of a la the Bene Gesserit or Paul Atreides, into the ancestral memory. That actually also relates very much with the perspective of the poem, where he's seeing the ruined Roman settlement from the perspective of the ancient Druid Celts, the Celtic ancestors, who, would love to feed these starving children of the Roman settlers if only they knew to eat acorns. Acorns are poisonous, Dad. You're not a squirrel. There's probably ways you can prepare it, maybe. Ancient people would have known, some method of preparing acorns. Or moss. Maybe these days, there'd be healthy types that would be like, well, yes, moss is good for omega-3s. No, that's algae. Anyway, so yeah, and plus, like, in that particular moment, it's like he was seeing it in around, I don't know exactly when it would have looked like what he's describing, where there was still some people living there. It makes one wonder. I mean, I think that the poem was a product of his reflecting, and I don't know if he had been there and walked around in the ruins, or if he was reflecting on the historical data that he had learned in school. But yeah, it's interesting beyond just that time and place. It's interesting to me to reflect on any time and place, or times and places that one feels particularly drawn to. The post-Roman deserting of Verulamium, what would it have been like? Who would have been there? What would they be like? What would it look like through their eyes? And then for the old wise ones, the native peoples of Britannia, before the Angles and the Saxons came, to come down and look at the ruins that the Romans left behind with a sort of bewildered. Plus, from their perspective, talking about theirs were the glories of the signposts at their doorways. Seems an awful lot like he's maybe not like making a comment. It's not like, I don't think he was like actively trying to make a statement in the sense of anything contrived, but he was legitimately looking at those ruins and these ruins. As I stand in New Delhi, a place that had been occupied by the British Empire, the Romans of the late second millennium, Common Era, right? The Roman Empire, I mean. So yeah, talking about the vampires nested in the Triumph Arches Eaves, talking about the l'Arc de Triomphe. They've got one of those here. The Delhi Gate looks just like l'Arc de Triomphe that Napoleon used to love building here and there, which I'm sure was based on some ancient Roman or Greek thing, very overtly. So I don't know. Yeah, it gives one pause, I think. I probably have other thoughts about it, but I would like to leave room for you to have your own thoughts about it. The temporary thumbnail for this image, the horizontal one, of course, for people who are seeing this on their phone, YouTube will randomly select just a frame of my face and stick that on the screen for you as you're scrolling, and I don't have any control over that, and I can't change it. But for the horizontal one, it's going to be an image of my dad with like just black to the left and black to the right, standing in his old den. He loved his den, I love my office, the one I have back in Goa these days. And that'll be the thumbnail for the next week or so until I'm able to get back to my computer, and then there'll be the image of my dad painted in blue on the right side, and the chicken on the left, and then the image of me like I am here talking to you in the middle of the screen in the center. And, well, you know, I would like to invite you to listen to it again. You know, having thought about it, having heard me ramble about it, to have your own thoughts about it, if you'd like. And again, if you would like to read along, and you have a Facebook account, then just go to open Facebook, search for Song of Verulamium, as it is in the title of this video, on Facebook, and you will find it. And when you get there, feel free to click like or follow or whatever on John Dan Reib. He passed away before the internet really got going, before those AOL free 24-hour AOL, you know, CD-ROMs started getting distributed and all that. Born March 6th. Oh, did I mention 2 days from now is his birthday? That was the other reason I wanted to do this. He was born in Shanghai, China. His dad was a Standard Oil executive, stationed in Shanghai, China for 20 some odd years. And so he was born there shortly before things got so weird with Japan, you know, World War II. So he had to leave. He was a refugee technically, and he was in the newspaper as the youngest refugee aboard the USS President Coolidge, which later was to sink and is now at the bottom of the Pacific Ocean. Fun stuff, weird. Speaking of ghosts and haunted things. Anyway, so he was born March 6th, 1940, and in 2 days, it's going to be March 6th of 2025. So he would have been 85 as of now, or as of 2 days from now, or whatever, from your perspective in time. And so he was born March 6th in Shanghai, which means at the time it was March 5th in California, so it was always confusing as to whether we should celebrate his birthday on March 5th or March 6th. But he didn't care much for his birthday. You know, but one time I gave him, I think it was actually Valentine's Day, or God, I don't know. I gave him a little Merlin wizard thing, and yeah, pewter. And that was the other time I saw him cry. And I said it reminded me of him, and I still have it. Its arm, it had an arm that had a crystal ball in the hand, whatever little stone that was. That arm fell off, but the rest of it's still intact, and it's there with all the gods on my table in my office temple in Goa. And anyway, so if you're seeing this in your next life, I don't know, maybe you're in your early 20s or something, happy birthday, Dad. And I guess that's it. And all right, so this is the mid-break special episode, and we'll return in a week and a half or so, sometime in mid-March, with Frater BT reading from that Martin Luther book, Oh Fun. And until then, and as always, wishing you a sincere and heartfelt